Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This finger show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Batman Caped Crusader, Season 1, Episode 7. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Then this episode in particular does a really good job showing, the very different approaches that both Barbara and Jim have when it comes to the law. Jim is very much things are black and white. Bad people are bad people. Good people are good people. He doesn't really see the gray of it all, whereas Barbara does, because she thinks like everything isn't so binary, because it's like, people can make mistakes and circumstantial stuff. She's saying like the cops didn't do their jobs, because we actually don't, and I guess that's kind of the point of leaving it so open-ended, because we don't know what her client that she helped get off this at the beginning of the episode. We don't know what he was accused of, because it's like, yeah, he did a thing, but she was saying like there's circumstance, because I think they keep it vague because it doesn't matter, because you can imagine it was this or that, because she was making it sound like, well, it wasn't anything bad he was being accused of, and like I said, it was like circumstantial, but we never got the exact details. And I guess like that's by keeping it vague, you don't have to kind of pick a side on, like, if you you're saying this particular crime is like, circumstantial evidence can make someone seem more like. I think that's probably why they kept it vague. It's like you can use your own imagination and put in a crime that wouldn't be too bad, but bad enough that you're like, it would be circumstantial situation, because there was like no proper like evidence really gathered. Gordon puts it as, Jim says like, these are good cops who did the job. I know who the cops that were behind this arrest. They were good, but Jim has a very, at least from Barbara's perspective, a very pessimistic view on it, and she wants to believe that, not saying that Jim believes like people are innately bad, but he's like, people know right from wrong, and if you choose to do wrong, then you're bad. Not kind of saying that, once again, there's a gray area to that. He's very steadfast in it, but you're also kind of like, as a cop, it would make sense you would have that perspective, and it kind of makes sense why, as a lawyer, that Barbara probably wants to try to see the best in people, want to see that people are better and just don't assume the worst in them. And that might also be why Barbara didn't follow her father into law enforcement in that same capacity, why she became a lawyer defending people versus being a cop who arrests people. So, because she even says it near the end of the episode, she's like, I don't believe in the system, because she sees how flawed it is, and that's why she tries to fight for the underdog, people she feels like are being crapped on and cheated by the system. But either way, what sets this whole thing off in this episode is there's a shot taken at Gordon. Turns out later on, someone put a hit out on him. And at first, when they said the name Floyd Lawton, I was like, isn't that Deadshot's name? I looked it up and it's like, yes, it is. So I was like, interesting. So they killed Deadshot in this universe. So I was like, not unless that's implying like maybe someone else in this. Once again, it's its own continuity. You don't have to stick to the comics, but that's interesting to be like, oh yeah, Floyd Lawton, whether he would have become Deadshot in this universe or not. He was an assassin, so not unless they write around that, but they were like, no, the guy, they held up a mug shot, so I don't know if that was kind of implying. I don't remember if he actually died. Maybe he didn't die and he's still alive. That was just him being arrested again, but like, didn't they shoot, like, didn't Corrigan like shoot and kill him? Someone has to correct me in the comments down below. Because I know they held up the mug shot, but that could have been like from before. That wasn't like more recently. So, not unless he was in the hospital or something. So he could still be like back as Deadshot if he didn't die, but I thought he did. So, either way, Gordon's very like, I'm going to stand my ground. I'm not going to run. I get it, because you want to show strength, because it's like, I'm supposed to I'm the face, in a way, I'm kind of the face of the GCPD. And if I run, and like, then I'm just I'm giving every criminal to go ahead and like, oh, we can scare Gordon off. And it's like, no, I got to stay steadfast. Because a lot of times you will see Gordon be very stubborn. I always think about like the version of him from, Ben, I'm blanking on Ben's last name, but from Gotham, who played, it's not like Ben McKenzie, is it? I don't think that's it, but who played Jim on Gotham, but he's not willing to listen to Barbara, who's like, yo, you need to get some protective service, because like I said, he feels like they're making too much of a fuss about it. But I do love that he had a change of mind when Barbara was like, yo, you coming home and everything, okay, you want to be steadfast in you. I think it's stupid you're not wanting protection, but at least think about, like, the fact is we have neighbors. You will drag the entire neighborhood into this gunfight if something pops off here. And he looks at a house across the street. There's like a little tricycle, so it's like, yeah, there's kids that grow up nearby. So it's like, right, he reluctantly agreed to what Barbara wanted. I do love that this all happened because Barbara got a heads up from Bruce, because the moment he found, Batman, and the moment he found out about it, went to a bar and started beating the crap out of criminals to get information. And I love just the whole, like, can you just not do that? Could you just not just appear like that and then immediately just as quickly disappearing? So you also got to give it up to Bruce for being so deranged that it's like, I mean, I'm sure Bruce has done that. Well, I'm sure there are occasions where he's been allowed to go to prison and go into a prison to question someone. We've seen that before, but literally breaking into the prison to talk to, like, knocking out the guards just to confront the person. Specifically, this is him at Blackgate, which begs the question, how many people he's arrested. Well, I'm sure everyone he's arrested so far in the show is in Arkham and not Blackgate. But because I know some of his criminals do end up in Blackgate. I actually don't know what. I mean, I'm sure, like, if you're criminally insane, you'll end up in Arkham. But I actually don't know, like, the delineation between why some people end up at Blackgate, some people end up at Arkham. Not because someone correct me. Is Arkham supposed to be like a this is where, like, all the, like, crazy? Well, I know you're not supposed to, but, like, I think we can all say crazy when we're talking about the fiction place of Gotham, because Gotham is batshit crazy. But maybe it's like for, like, all, like, superpowered supervillain people, and then Blackgate's for, like, lower end big time criminals. I don't know. Like a Falcone would end up at Blackgate, but a Scarecrow would be at Arkham type of thing. Either way. It's just kind of wild, him breaking into a prison just to question people and beating up inmates. It's like, yeah, but it's like, Bruce isn't going to get so caught up in the ethics of it. It's just like, I don't care. I'm trying to make sure a good man doesn't die. And so, because if it wasn't for Gordon, people like Flash and Bullock would run rampant, because they were like, yo, we'll go out in the streets, we'll catch the usual suspects, and we'll basically bust a couple skulls till we get some information. And it's like, no, we're not going to turn, like, Gotham into, like, a war zone, so do it by the book and kind of, like, investigate this. Obviously, there is a bigger, like, it's open season hit on Gordon, and we see the people arrive. And the guy, like, when the main bad guy shows up, I was like, he looks familiar. I was like, that mask seems so familiar, and I can't place it. At first, I was like, it can't be who I think it is, right? And I was thinking to myself, I was like, can't be Onomatopoeia, right? And it super is. Maybe Onomatopoeia has popped up in other stuff I've seen before, because obviously more recently was Superman and Lois. Onomatopoeia was in season 3, but, like, they made Onomatopoeia more of a meta-human. I don't know if that's, like, later versions of that character, or is that just specifically to Superman and Lois, because, like, sometimes there are people who don't have powers who have powers, so I don't know if that's one of those things. I mean, so this seems like it's a very classic version of Onomatopoeia, not less that version in Superman and Lois is just specific to the show, or that's kind of a later, like, certain comic runs have used Onomatopoeia in that regard. I don't know. I also can't remember, it's like, someone correct me, was there an onomatopoeia in Batman Beyond? It's been so long that I don't remember, but I feel like I do remember a futuristic onomatopoeia, but I might be thinking of a different character. Either way. I think it's so interesting because this has that 40 setting and stuff like that, and technology being what it is it's not the easiest. You can't just like track people down however you want to. Like Bruce had to wait for like the call to come through like on the police scanner and radio before he found them, because he was trying to call their house phone. Well, Alfred was, but they had already left by then. And it's like, how do you reach them? Because there are no like I said, it's just it plays into like, oh, you limit the amount of like, obviously it's played a role in his detective, like how like you had to go like super like, oh, can't look stuff up on the internet. You kind of have to look up maybe some like newspaper articles. Like you kind of have to search for stuff, like very old school, like I said, gumshoe detective noir type of thing. You don't have the benefits of technology, supercomputer and stuff like that. So I hadn't really commented on it until this episode, but it is just that thing of like, right, calling people on like phones, and it's just kind of like a landline type of situation, and like it makes, that's why he was so far away from them for so long, because he was going in one direction, just trying to see if he could stumble across them, and then had to turn around to find them later on after they almost got ran off the road. I think that probably should have been a key sign that the bad guys were disguised as officers. Like, oh, how'd you get access to the cars? To be fair, it's like, well, we already know there are dirty cops, but it seemed like these hits were something else entirely, so it is interesting that the place that they would end up in is, what was it, the Wayne Gardens, like kind of like a community. Because I think Bruce might have referenced, I think him and Lucius were talking about it last episode, but it's like something that's still in development, and they're stashed out there. And it ends up being this interesting conversation of, even though Barbara had called Gordon, like, called her dad, I'm so used to calling him Jim by just like Gordon. So it's like, right, we're talking about two Gordons here. So I always have to go back and specify. But she called Jim pessimistic or cynical, but she's kind of got a cynical view, because there's this whole conversation about like this house or whatever, the fake house that they're in. It's like, oh, this doesn't feel like Gotham. And it's just, and for her, it's like where she lived, Montoya kind of gave her a little guff about it, because it's like, hey, you came from like a probably like a more richer neighborhood. It's like, oh yeah, like people from a richer neighborhood. She's like, yo, we were just like across like the river. But it's just like, for her, it's like Gotham was just, and Jim is like beyond saving. And it's just like, and for her, it's like, I'm not saying that, it's just because we don't know how her mom died in this continuity. I mean, we only see pictures of her and her dad, so I don't know if like her mom was a victim of something that happened in Gotham. But it's just, Gotham is what it is, and it's just sometimes it's like, is it even worth fighting for? And she tries to fight for it in her own way, but it's just like the cards are so stacked against you, and it can be a little demoralizing, and you're just kind of sad, and especially because it is that large range of like, oh, like the upper echelon get to live in specific areas. Like they never had to really deal with Gotham like the rest of us. It's so interesting that Montoya kind of went at Barbara a little bit like that. But it's like, it's kind of like you talk down on Gotham like it, once again, like it's beyond saving. But we are here fighting for the soul of Gotham, because this is our home. We've lived here. You grew up somewhere else, so you don't really know, like, it's easy to kind of talk trash about this city having not really experienced or really know it. Like you kind of turn your eye away from it, and yeah, you're kind of fighting for it now, but like, are you really fighting for Gotham, or are you just kind of picking and choosing who you're fighting for rather than just the city as a whole? Because she says she's not saying it's beyond saving, but maybe to some extent she is feeling that way. Either way, stuff pops off, and turns into a gunfight, and everyone's holding their own. That whole situation in retrospect is kind of crazy. Corrigan and Barbara, like fighting off those guys in like the backyard. I was like, like in the kitchen area, I was like, oh, that was pretty dope, and them fighting and holding off on their own. And then Corrigan, it turns out he's a dirty cop, which is so, I was like, oh, that's a good twist, because he's been here for a little bit. Like he's one of those cops that's been in the background, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh, he's a dirty cop. Like, was he always a dirty cop, or did he finally like fold? That, which is kind of, I think he hadn't really shown any dirty cop tendencies up until now. So I'd like to believe that he just folded for the money. I mean, maybe it was always there in him. It becomes that conversation as a larger whole of, is this a circumstantial situation? Like, does it change the fact is that he took money to perform this hit? We don't know what the money was for. Who cares what it's for? He still did it. So is it just because the money was too good so he couldn't pass up on it this time? Or has he done other shady stuff in the past? Doesn't matter. It's kind of all moot at this point, but it's still, you would like some insight into that. But like I said, I just love that twist of like, yeah, well, first and foremost, that the hit wasn't out on Ron Gordon. It wasn't Jim. It was Barbara. Because this involves the main guy, like, what was it? I don't think we actually know his name, do we? Because wasn't Mueller the in-between guy? Maybe the actual hitman guy was Mueller, but I'm not the one who actually ordered the hit was Mueller, but the dude that was kind of the in-between, I thought he was Mueller. Whatever the case may be, it turns out the old person, like the person who set this all up, was a client of Barbara's that wanted to take her out, which we'll get to in a second. But it's like, man, that sucks. I actually legitimately felt betrayed. I was like, oh, Corrigan, seemed like you were a good guy. You were taking care of Marcus, who had gotten shot. You were looking after him and stuff. It's like, yo, you seem like a good guy, but it's like just to make that twist hit. Like I said, he was a background cop. It's not like he's a main character, but he's there in the background. Like I said, he seemed like he's pretty legit. But I also guess that also hints to how the guys got because the guys in the police car were only supposed to follow, but they got too trigger happy. So I'm assuming, like, I don't know if it's interesting because I think it was Montoya being like, oh, Corrigan, did you bring them? And he was like, no, I didn't. I was like, but now I'm wondering, like, oh, did he actually do it? Is that the irony behind her asking him first and it ended up being him? Or were they just kind of doing their own thing? Well, because this was supposed to be like everyone's aiming for it. Like, only the person who does it gets the actual hit. So he might not have had any... That might also be why because he could have gotten after Barbara at any point in time. So now I'm sitting here thinking about it. It's like he wasn't working with Onomatopoeia and his guys. It was like, right, they were competition. So wiping out the competition. Oh, Barbara, her defenses are down. Now I can make it seem like one of Onomatopoeia's people did it and cover my tracks. But yeah, he got busted in the end. It's like, wow. And luckily, obviously, Batman has showed up to help out. So, but yeah, it turns out the storyline kind of comes full circle because Barbara sits down with the guy and she's just staring at him. He was like, oh, come on, like, I already called it off, like, because your friend came and beat the ever living piss out of me, so we're okay, right? And she's like, I gave you the best deal. He was like, you gave me the best deal. I ended up here. He was like, I don't deserve to be here with people like them. I just don't. And she's like, actually, you do. It's kind of like, it's going to change her perspective on it. It's going to, like, darken that perspective, like, that out view you had on people going forward. That, like, right, you don't want to admit it, but your dad was right. It's like, this guy, you gave him the best defense possible, and you're like, right, I gave you the best, I put you in the best place possible. He's like, really? This, like, no, this is from, like, hardcore people. I don't deserve to be here. You should have done better. It's like, yeah, but he's not taking any responsibility for his own actions. It's all on Barbara. Like, oh, you didn't do enough. It's like, well, you wouldn't have to worry about her doing enough if you hadn't, but it kind of comes back to that point of, should he be held responsible for it, considering, because in the sense that he's like, Barbara had made this whole point early on in the episode about, like, circumstantial stuff, and we don't know Home Dude's crime and what he got locked up for and what he could have gotten versus what Barbara got him, but it's once again, disheartening just to be like, right, I thought I'm trying to do my best. I'm trying to do my best by people, and he literally set out a hit on me because he felt like I didn't do a good enough job for him. So, kind of a sad note to kind of end on that, for Barbara. So, just everything in general, So, especially because how preachy she was to her dad when we find out, once again, wasn't even the right Gordon. It wasn't Jim. To be fair, it makes a lot of sense because every time they were after Jim, he was around Barbara. You felt like if they wanted to go after Jim, when you actually think about it, Jim was on his own at any point in time. They could have gotten him, but very rarely in this episode was Barbara alone, but once again, it kind of plays into Jim was very rarely alone either. So just interesting and nice twist and reveal. So it's going to be interesting to see how much this affects Barbara going forward and how much of a change. Once again, like we don't know how much of an aftermath like the Harley thing has. Like once again, I thought there would be blowback for her from that, but no. I mean, maybe that also influences her decisions. You also have to think about it. Like these episodes are written in a way to be episodical. Some are taking place after others. Like I'm sure they are designed to be very subsequential, but you don't know like how much time has passed. So like she might have already had to deal with some of the guff about being Harley's friend, but now it's like, you know, we're past that. But I wonder is some of that influencing her decision of trying not to. I mean, not like Harley's circumstances are circumstantial, but I wonder if any of that is sticking in her head with all of this. But we'll ultimately have to, like I said, wait to see where all of this takes us going forward and if how this might affect Barbara going forward. But really, that's all I want to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.